Hello, my name is Daniel Cartwright, and this is my new YouTube channel. I'm starting today with a game I played this morning on chess.com. Time controls were 90 minutes with a 30-second increment, meaning that each time a move was made, 30 seconds was added onto the clock of the player that made it. So let's get started. The game started with b3, the Nimzo-Larsen opening. I responded with d5, the classical variation of the Nimzo-Larsen opening. Knight f3, developing. c5, and note that the Nimzo-Larsen is a hyper-modern opening, meaning that white will try to control the center with his minor pieces and without occupying the center, so control the center without occupying it, and make an eventual pawn break at his opponent's pawn center. So e3, a6. At first this looks purely prophylactic, preventing bishop b5 check, but it has another purpose in that it's a waiting move. So I'm maintaining my flexibility and my options by not showing my hand now. So by not playing something like knight to f6, knight to c6 now, I'm keeping more of my options for later. So I don't have to make a decision now. Keeping flexibility, something I try to do in a lot of my games. So c4, striking at my pawn center, e6, lending support to my pawn center, and bishop b2. A move very typical in the Nimzo-Larsen, getting the bishop on the long a1, h8 diagonal. As you can see, it's almost totally cleared, and it's pointed straight at the black king side. So knight to c6, and it's a very powerful bishop. Knight to c6, developing move. g3, getting ready to fianchetto the bishop. Another possibility was d4. And now d4. So the idea behind this is that after e takes d4, c takes d4, and a move like bishop g2, I can play e5, and essentially blunt this bishop on b2, so that it's biting on a rock. Castle, and I don't know if this next move is the most accurate, and I haven't checked it with an engine yet, but it was part of my preparation for the Nimzo-Larsen, and it's f6. So really putting a damper on that bishop on b2. d3, making room for the knight to come to d2, and knight to h6. This is a maneuver I've done a few times before, where I've played f6, which looks a bit unusual, and then played knight to h6, where the knight will then come to either f7 or f5. And I will choose where it will go at a later time. And it's just there to, because this f6 move was made, let me explain. Because this f6 move was made, the classical square on f6 for the knight is no longer available. So this is a way for me to give the knight more options later on in the game. This maneuver here. Knight bd2, bishop b7, getting ready to castle. a3 prevents knight b4 hitting at the weak d3 pawn. Also readies a b4 advance. We didn't see the b4 advance in the game, but it's just an idea to be aware of. Castles, knight to e1, preparing f4 to strike at my central pawns. Bishop e6. The main reason for this is that after I play queen d7, I can play bishop to h3, trade off light square bishops, and White's great light-squared bishop will be gone, and he'll have light-square weaknesses around his king side. Another reason you could assign to this move, it's always good to assign multiple reasons for a move if you can. You'd want good reasons, obviously. Is that because of this dark square pawn chain in the center, I have a lot of light square weaknesses, namely on the a2 g8 diagonal. And if a move like bishop d5 check is played sometime in the future, I can respond with bishop takes d5. That's just one possible reason for the move that you could assign to it. It's always good to assign multiple reasons to your moves. So f4 and knight to f5. This is a very strong move, as if you look at the e3 square, my knight can land on e3, where it would be supported by my pawn on d4, as well as hit the rook and queen, and it's just a very strong outpost for black's knight. Knight that deep in your position cannot be allowed. So, knight c2, the purpose of this move is to meet knight e3 with knight takes knight, which is what we do see. Knight e3, hitting the queen and rook, knight takes e3, pawn takes e3, and knight b1. Knight b1 is probably much too passive. Probably want to play something like knight to e4 or knight to f3. b1 just seems like you're, giving up a move. He's going to have to move back to b1 and then to c3. And to c3 could hit d5, but it's almost like you're using too many moves for one piece. So knight b1, it's also very passive. Bishop c5, keeping the initiative. The threat here is that is e2, check, which would win the queen. So king h1, getting off the diagonal of the bishop, removing the threat of e2. Queen d7, getting ready to play bishop g4. Knight c3, redeveloping the knight. Bishop g4, hitting the queen. And here, my opponent made a mistake. He played bishop to f3. Better was knight to f2. Knight to e2, sorry. Blockading the pawn on e3 and blocking the threat of the bishop. But instead, he played bishop to f3. The reason this is bad is because after bishop takes f3, and if either piece takes on f3, I play knight d4. And if rook takes, he played rook f1, but if rook takes f3, rook takes e3, sorry, knight takes b3, hitting the rook on a1, and the rook on e3, so that's not looking very good. Queen takes b3, bishop takes e3, and probably something like knight d5. And it works pretty much the same way if queen takes on f3. But so we don't have that. We have rook f1, and after rook f1, my opponent was thinking that I cannot play e2, because if I play e2, the knight on c3 will take e2, and if knight takes, queen takes, and everything's alright. But my opponent was wrong. If I can play e2, and if knight takes e2, it's a mate in 3. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find the mate in 3. after knight takes e2. Okay, the mate in 3, and this is what happened in the game. Knight takes e2. Queen c6, check. And to delay the mate longest, you need to play rook f3, and then queen takes. But my opponent's human didn't play that. King g1, and can you see the mate? It's knight takes e2, double check and mate. So the king cannot move to any of these squares. It's in check, and therefore it is mate. Okay, that's it for my first video, everyone. Thank you, and I hope to make more videos in the future. Any feedback will be appreciated, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.